the west side of the Wapak Range, on a farm my father bought in 1934. On it was a fallen down house, a small barn, and a big field, but all the rest was woods. The owner was named John Leathers, and I believe he was the son of the John Leathers who fought in the Civil War with the Peterborough Battalion and died in Andersonville Prison. His name is on the Civil War Memorial on Grove Street in Peterborough. But this would mean that since the Civil War, I am this land's fourth owner. The John Leathers who sold the land was aging and had some dementia. His house wasn't habitable. He slept in the barn. Tiny traces of gold are in the streams that run down from North Pack. And he would pan for gold in the streams. I believe that people in the town were worried about him, so they went to his home and found him boiling mica in order to get the gold to come out of it. And I don't think there is gold in mica. He was taken to what in those days passed for a nursing home. I hate to think what it was like, maybe almost like Andersonville Prison. But he sold the land to my dad for the asking price, with the condition in the deed that if gold was found on the land, we would share it with him. My dad also bought the land across the road. A very small house once stood there. The foundation was handmade with rocks, and it's still there today. And a woman lived in it. Passers-by would see her standing on her front step, barefoot. The foundation was all that was left by the time we came, but the woman had been the local prostitute. Because of her profession, our neighborhood was known as Caper Corner. In 1935, my dad built our house on the foundations of the Leathers house. A hand-dug well was within the foundation, and it's still there in my basement. And the old barn is now a garage and my office. Many thousands of cluster flies spend the winter in the attic, formerly the hayloft, and probably did so ever since the barn was built, maybe before the Civil War. I value these flies and their historic presence. My land is in a very favorable place. It's higher than the town and lower than the Wapak Range, which shelters it from the worst storms. These come from the northeast. And it's the last place to be hit by frost, but it's on a slopey hill of its own, so it's breezy. We have very few mosquitoes, and our water comes off North Pack, so during the 80 years that I've been there, we've always had plenty of fresh, clean water. In short, it's an excellent little microclimate. A number of old farms are in similar sites, and I think I know how they were chosen. Perhaps the first settlers took them from the Indian tribes who found them first. That would be the Abenaki and the Pennacook people, whose tribal boundaries merged somewhere near Peterborough. But my best guess is that whoever found these places learned about them from the deer. The deer know every microclimate in New Hampshire. And if you know where the deer go, you'll find the warmest, most mosquito-free place where edible plants are growing and not far from water. The Leathers house and barn were on top of our hill. My house and office are there now. And to this day, I go out most nights with a flashlight, and unless there's heavy snow, the shining eyes of several deer, low to the ground, are in the field at the edge of the woods. The deer sleep there. It's good to sleep in the open because you can see predators approaching. In winter, it's a bit warmer than the lower areas. On summer nights, a breeze gets rid of the mosquitoes, and that for the night. In the daytime, the deer are back in the woods, often on a ridge where the hemlock trees are growing. Once with my granddaughter, Margaret, who's here now, years ago, she was 11, we found a warm place under one of the hemlocks where a deer had been resting. She had just left. The warmth was from the warmth of her body. She'd been in one of the best places I've ever found. When resting there, she could see all the way down through the woods, almost to the field, and nobody could creep up behind her because the bushes were so thick they would make noise. There's nothing about my woods that the deer do not know. The entire Wapak range had been pasture. There's a little hut on the east side where the people tending the herds of cattle would sleep. I believe this was the route of cattle being driven to the Boston area, but this had all ended before we came. Even so, Peterborough is known for mills along the river. Even though Peterborough is known for mills along the river, virtually all of the surrounding area was farmland, with many small farms operating. My dad's among them. He raised milking shorthorn and cattle, and after building our house in 1935, and the farm was run by a wonderful man named Cyril Carr and his family. 2 of his children were the same age as me and my brother. We were the closest of friends, and his youngest son, Sonny Carr, now a grown-up, lives in Maine and still visits me sometime, and I love to see him. These houses were heated with wood. We cooked on wood stoves. Our phones were on a party line. To call the farmhouse, you asked the operator. You couldn't dial a phone. You had to pick it up and get the operator. You asked the operator to ring J on this line, and to call our house, you said, please ring M on this line. And to this day, we call our house the M house. We had workhorses named Duke, Bucky, and Blue. They pulled the plow and the hay wagon, and because lots of people didn't have cars and people still used horse and carriage. Cars were actually so rare that when we'd hear one coming, we'd all run to the window to see who it was. I remember the land from then. My dad loved wild places and would take us walking in the woods up North Back where the old pastures have been. And at the time, the trees hadn't grown back yet, just juniper and blueberries. He told us that someday all the land would be forest again, and so it is, just as I said. I wrote about all this in a book that just came out. It's called Dreaming of Lions, and that's something I have in there. I was fascinated by the stone walls. Why were there stone walls in the woods? My dad told us that the old farmers built them, surely including the first John Leathers before he went off to war. Of course, this was all done by hand. Men found the rocks, put them on a sledge pulled by a horse. It got dragged to the site. These were big, heavy rocks, lifted up one by one and put in place. Thousands and thousands of them. Nowadays, some people don't like stone walls and remove them, and that bothers me. This wonderful heritage vanishing. But mine are here to stay. My dad built some of them himself. And he eventually bought about 12,000 acres, including most of North Back. And it's all in conservation now, most with the Department of the Interior as a wildlife sanctuary. And mine is a wildlife sanctuary because it's surrounded by no hunting signs, and it is conserved thanks to the Monadnock Conservancy. In the 1930s, there was almost no important wildlife. I seem to remember that someone saw a deer or deer tracks, and the sighting was so unusual that it was reported in the newspaper. The old farmers had hunted all the deer and killed just about everything else, no matter how large or small. They shot hawks and owls on sight. I was in my 20s before I learned that there's no such thing as a chicken hawk. All hawks were called chicken hawks. Their corpses were nailed to the barn doors as a warning to others. The war on wildlife was very successful. When I was young, about the only animals bigger than the various kinds of mice were red squirrels and porcupines, and a few red foxes. But then many farms closed, especially in our area, and just about every species native to New Hampshire has repopulated. Mammals are more my specialty than birds, but we've seen a number of hawks and a huge great horned owl. When he's standing on the ground, he's almost 3 feet tall. There's also a big bobcat. He's so big, he's fearless. I recently saw him throwing a Canada lynx in a threatening manner. I also see bears, especially if I don't remember to bring the bird feeder indoors. I see a fisher, also coyotes, also a red fox, but these are being moved out by coyotes. Beavers are in our pond, also an otter. One year I planted oats, and the day they sprouted, 45 deer came all at once and ate every single sprout. So I'm estimating that our local deer population is 45. Several times we've seen a mountain lion. They're here despite the opinion of New Hampshire Fish and Game, which says they're not. A mountain lion needs to eat 1 deer a week to survive. So maybe a mountain lion helps explain why the deer population in our area has been so relatively stable. Two groups of the head of an event, relatively stable. We even have a wolf. The head of New Hampshire Fish and Game has said that whether we like it or not, there are wolves in New Hampshire. And one night I heard a wolf who had joined a pack of coyotes. Two groups of coyotes were exchanging calls, maybe a half a mile apart. And in one of the groups, a wolf was howling. I'm absolutely sure of this. I spent a summer alone on Baffin Island with a pack of denning wolves, and I know exactly what wolves sound like. So I'd say that from that point of view, the point of view of the natural world, in some ways we are close to where we were before the Civil War. And in some ways we're slightly ahead. We didn't used to have wild turkeys, but we do now because a man from Fish and Game imported some informally. And except for the turkeys, this condition is thanks only to the animals themselves and to the practice of conservation. Thank you.
This will not be polished, and it has not been rehearsed. I normally spend a lot of time in the woods, so there's reasons for that. But I wanted to thank the Monadnock Conservancy for asking me to speak. I feel quite honored by that. This will also be from the heart. It's my general nature. So I want to try to tell you how I got here, and principally what I've done as a consulting forester for 36 years. I consider myself in the 1%, not the 99, because I've traveled more miles in the Monadnock region than 99% of the country. So I've spent a lot of time getting to know the woodlands, the people that own the woodlands, the people that work on the woodlands, and the people who manufacture forest products from the woodlands. That's principally the nature of my activities on a professional level. And I feel like I've been very blessed to follow my heart. We are all extremely blessed to be living in the Monadnock region. This is a very unique area. A lot of diversity of ownership, which means a diversity of land use. Some areas have one ownership, and one ownership means one approach to managing land. And I think that's one of the blessings of living in the Monadnock region, is there's a lot of diversity. Because what one person does may be extremely different than another. And we have people who have wild land conservation easements, and we have people who have a different flavor, and that allows for diversity. And I think that that's a very healthy thing to have in the environment. So I'm going to regress to the how I got here part of my presentation. Everyone who knows me knows I'm half-baked. I came from New York, Long Island, New York. By the time I was 10 years old, I knew it was a place to be from. And so I grew up, but I was very fortunate in growing up in a unique place in East Islip, New York. The home that my parents bought, and I was 6 months old at the time they bought the house. I lived there until I left home at the age of 19. Was like 900 homes, all on 10th acre lots. Definitely suburbia, and there was a lot of suburbia besides the development that I grew up in. But I was very fortunate. The development I grew up in literally abutted the Bayard Cutting Arboretum, which is in East Islip, and it was a mansion that was built by an industrialist. It was donated to the state of New York. It was always a beautiful place. I always went there, and it is through nature that I get the most spiritual uplifting. It is just rock solid evidence of spiritualism to me, the natural environment. And when I'm having difficulties with human beings, I have a place to go and work things out. So anyway, and that might tell you something about how much difficulty I have with human beings. But and I've learned that a lot of it is my fault. But so I live next to this Bayard Cutting Arboretum, and it is an extremely beautiful place. It's by the Connecticut River, and I didn't realize why it was so beautiful. The great American landscape architect Olmsted designed it. So, duh, that's why I love to be there. And going there with organized plantings, beautiful landscape, tree groves, and walking paths. And the mansion itself was also a natural history museum. So there were cases of butterflies and beetles and birds, and there were even Indian bones. And so this is what I was exposed to. This is where I went when I was young. And so it instilled this love of nature within me. And next to the Arboretum was a place called the Sportsman's Club, and that was a 4,000 acre property. So again, I had a natural environment. It was managed for a specific purpose, but I didn't have anything to do with that, nor did I understand any of it. But I had this natural environment to look at, and that was enjoyable. And then I had the Hampshire State Park, which again was connected to both these properties, and that was about 20,000 acres. So I had this wonderful backyard. So. And then the other principal thing that I think guided me to a forestry career was the fact that my grandfather purchased an abandoned farm in upstate New York for a retirement place, and ever since I was that tall, we would go up there for a week in the summer, and I just thought that was the coolest place in the world. And I said, I gotta live in this kind of environment, because it was very rural, upstate New York, in the Norwich, New York area. But this is what led me towards forestry, and I have to admit, as a teenager, I really didn't know what a forester did, but I just knew that there weren't any of them on Long Island. We're going to go for that. So and another thing that I think is very important to my nature and my business is the fact that I came from a very working class family, 9 kids. I went to my dad. I'd like some spending money, and he said, well, go right down there and mow that lawn, that person's lawn, and you'll get some spending money. So I learned I needed to work at a very early age if I wanted any kind of spending money. So I did a lot of landscaping, I delivered newspapers, and so the point is, I delivered a service and I expected remuneration. And so I got early training in how to run a business, and I think it's really served me very well in my adult life. So anyway, I went to the New York State Ranger School. It's a one-year program. I have a technician degree. I also like to tell everybody that I work with, it's a good thing. Forestry generally only requires average intelligence. That's a good thing for me. But it does require a lot of experience. That's really, I think, what makes, distinguishes a forester. Are you paying attention? Are you looking at what's happening? And are you developing an understanding of what's happening? So I think that's been an important component of the way I handle things. So as far as a forester, I call myself a dirt forester, which means I'm an operational forester. I like to see things happen. I prefer not to write about it. I actually prefer to do it. So I have a very strong component of my business model is handling timber sales. I inventory land to determine what the ownership has. I then, this is the most important part of my job, I try to find out what the landowner is trying to accomplish, and then I design a program to try to steer the property in that direction. So, another big reason why I took this approach is the fact that timber harvesting is where the action is, but it's also where things can go horribly wrong or be steered in the right direction. So I felt that's where I wanted to be, and so that's the way I approached my business. About 80, somewhere between 75 and 85% of my revenue stream in my business comes from supervising timber harvesting. So, and what the best way I can describe what a consulting forester does is I am like the architect and the general contractor for a timber sale. I meet with the owner, I design a program, and then I actually implement it. So, okay, we're up to page 3. So, one of the things I often tell people is, what am I best at? Putting trees on wheels. That's what I do. Another way of saying that is making stumps. But through the manipulation of the resource, I like to think of positive manipulation of the resource. I believe I've had a significant impact on Cheshire County because I've harvested wood on probably 35,000 acres. So Dave Kent's signature is out there. You may not recognize it, but I once jokingly told somebody I want Cheshire County to be seen from satellite imagery. Now that can be done properly, and there is a lot of humor in that. I don't really mean literally, but some of the projects I've been involved with that I'm quite proud of. I was asked to do the land clearing for the Jaffrey Golf Course. Very interesting project. I really enjoyed it. I've been manager of the Tone organization for over 30 years up in Alstead. It's a 3,500 acre piece of land, and I've been involved in the Little Monadnock Realty Trust down in Richmond, another 2,000-acre parcel, with a 25-plus year relationship with the owners. And that's the other thing that the way I design my business is I like doing business on a relationship basis. I really value that. The other thing that I really focus on in my business, which is a little different than some other foresters, you have to understand foresters have different focus. Forestry is a combination of art and science. So I tell people if you had 10 foresters look at your property, you're going to have maybe two over here and 2 over here, and hopefully 6 in the middle that are somewhat the same. But you're likely to get different suggestions. You're dealing with human beings, and you're dealing with people's outlook and their experience, and so you're going to get different prescriptions. So I have always had a strong interest in understanding the economics, because I realize that economics has a tremendous impact on what happens on the land. And for many years, I talked about Cheshire County being a saw timber only county. That's like the first 20 years of my career, because we had a difficulty moving pulpwood, lower quality trees, the weed trees. We had a difficulty moving them off the land because the markets were very poor. The last 16 years, that has changed. And so has the machinery to harvest trees. That's one thing that's very different from when I started to now. A 540 John Deere skidder was a huge machine when I started, when they first came out, and now they look like a Tonka toy compared to the equipment. So the equipment is much bigger. They can flow a lot of wood. So it requires, the other thing I tell the people that I work with, I have an intimate relationship with the operation. Particularly if it's a mechanized operation, I need to be on the land every day to make sure that things are going the way it should go. So I didn't tell you a whole heck of a lot about the resource. We are blessed to have a wonderful resource. Just if trees want to grow here, if you do not mow your lawn, you will have a forest in 5 years. Okay? And all this landscape, it all came back naturally. There's no big planting schemes or anything. It comes back on its own. It doesn't always come back to what we would like it to come back to. But we're very fortunate. The land is very forgiving to what we've done to it. And so I've been told it's time to wrap it up. And I'm looking forward to the time frame when I no longer have to be thinking about putting trees on wheels. I can just go. I love trees. I do love trees, but farmers love their cows. But the reality is the reality. So, thank you very much.
Good evening. I'm Peter Sawyer, and this is my wife, Ann. People often ask me, how long have you been farming? And I often reply, since 1858. For that is the year my great-great-grandfather moved onto the place. In other words, all my life. On the other hand, my wife has been here for 56 years. It's as long as we've been married. When we were going out together, I told her that I was first and foremost married to the farm. Now, 56 years later, she is first and foremost married to the farm. And I couldn't get her away from it. Not too long ago, I heard a talk by a lady who loved this region. One thing she said was that when she first drove around the back roads of this area, she was so pleased with all the forests surrounding her. How great it was, she said, that so little had changed. Well, I sat there thinking just the opposite. For having lived on a farm all my life, on which 5 generations had previously farmed, I was aware that so much had changed. These forests that she drove through had once been open fields and pastures. These pastures at one time had never-failing springs in them that provided the cattle or sheep with water. Now, because of the trees that grow and consume the vast quantity of water, the springs have become only seasonal. And I thought, before the Civil War, there would have been a set of farm buildings every mile or less as you drove along. That has all changed. Fields that my great-grandfather Alfred Sawyer mowed by hand that first year he came onto the farm in 1858 are now grown up. Meadows, or what we in the area call meadows, in other words, drained beaver swamps, that my father hayed until the middle 40s, are full of brush, swamp maples, are flooded over by the beaver, and the ditches filled in. Even parts of fields that I myself helped hay as a small boy are grown up. The mountain pastures were the first to grow up. We had a 90-acre pasture in Troy and Marlborough, known as Bigelow Hill. At one time, my father put over 30 head of cattle on it. We pastured it the last time in 1956 with 8 head, and there was hardly enough feed for them. Our Cleary Hill pasture in Sharon off 124 has been logged off twice, yet my older brothers remember when it was pastured. My uncle Roscoe Sawyer and my cousin Hiram Cutter each had their pastures off the Gap Mountain Road. Whiting Farms in Wilton put 60 head of cattle on Gap Mountain every year, all in my memory. Now it has all gone back to the wild. Is it any wonder that all the wildlife has come back? So there has been, from my point of view, as a longtime farmer, a great change. Where once the beaver had been eliminated, where there were so few deer, no mourning doves, seldom but very few geese, no coyotes, no turkeys, where chicken hawks were shot on sight. And now the black bear that raises hob in my cornfields, to the point where I have given up on fields that I used to plant corn on because the damage is so great that they cause. They are all here for the first time in over 160 years. Where our milk comes from who knows where. Our vegetables mainly come from California, Mexico, South America, or wherever. Yes, there has been a great change. Page 3. I will add a few more comments. I was born in 1938, the year of the Great Hurricane, and grew up in the 40s and into the 50s. During this time, up until 1948, the dairy business was quite profitable because much of the world was either at war or in reconstruction. Their agriculture suffering and food shortages rampant. After the war, prices were steady, although lower, until the 50s and the Korean War, which prolonged some prosperity on the farms. But then in the mid-50s, prices for beef and milk dropped before the 1940 prices. Drought in the West sent cattle to the market for lack of feed, and beef prices fell. That was when I decided to continue the family farm. We plugged along until I got back from college in '58. Things changed rather rapidly after that. We went from using a bull to artificial insemination, from handling loose hay to baling, from using a corn binder to a field chopper, from 40-quart milk cans to bulk tanks, and from handling grain once a month off the railroad car to bulk handling of feed grains. I could go on some with anecdotes of happenings on the farm, but I have it at that only to say so far we have kept the houses off the land. Thank you.
Hopefully you can hear me. A quote from my father-in-law, Jason C. Sawyer, in the 1950 letter goes, "All in all, I still believe that if a person can keep reasonably rugged, there is no happiness or contentment in this world to compare with the satisfaction to be derived from work well done and no work that will yield the enjoyment of farming." Farm life has its share of trial and tribulation. It isn't an idyllic and pastoral dream by any means. In our 56 years of farming together, and Peter's over 70 years, we have seen family farming in New England fast becoming extinct, replaced by the final crop, houses and parking lots. Real farms contribute so much to the New Hampshire fabric and landscape. We would like to think we will not lose our remaining agricultural heritage. Much is being reborn in our niche farms and with their organic leanings that are presently fighting for their survival. Knowing who raised our food and how our animals are cared for is so important to our well-being. This calls for dedication far above the ordinary. A farmer has to have tenacity and be married to the farm to accomplish anything worthwhile in a small agricultural operation. Since 1858, Sawyer Farm has nestled on the rocky soil under Mount Monadnock. So much stone picking on those fields. It has been home to 6 generations. Peter is 5th generation, and our daughter Jennifer in front row is 6th generation. Growing up, she had many farm chores, as old farm kids do. In the 1800s, Durham cattle and fine horses were raised by Alfred and Lucy. Later, their son Clifton and his son Jason specialized in purebred jerseys, which are the cow of my heart. We raised Holsteins, but I dearly love the jerseys. The first great barn fire came with a lightning strike in 1917. The barn was rebuilt with parts of 3 other area barns, and we added onto this 3-story structure. In 1960, we commenced our herd with 60 Jerseys and 4 Holsteins. And to expand our herd, we bought baby calves and raised all our herd replacements. It takes 2 years of growing before a heifer starts to milk with her first calf. And only with her 3rd calf does she really become a cow. She's first a first calf heifer, and then a second calf heifer, then she's a cow. By the 1970s, our dairy herd numbered 100 head with 125 growing herd replacement heifers. Everyone had a name, no one was just a number. And each had her own personality from the moment she was born. At the time of our disastrous fire in 1999, the Sawyer farm was the last remaining dairy farm in Jaffrey. Peter can remember when there were at least 15 little farms with cows. Now the farm produces square hay bales and round baleage. And pastured on the land are our cousin Alfred's, he's in the front row, brood cows and calves. Alfred and Rachel, and she too is in the front row, raise commercial pumpkins and have a large garden. Alfred makes the 7th generation, and his son, Sam and Eli, who also are here, make the 8th generation. Sam and Eli come twice daily with their mother to feed Mo and to teach him all the things the 4-H calf has to know for Cheshire Fair. I would have loved to do this in childhood, but I never met a cow until I met Peter. I met him in the late 50s when I went to a square dance in Jaffrey, and it was love at first sight. And then love for the farm too, and for its wonderful, hardworking, 4-legged ladies. Hundreds of years ago, cave people painted beautiful animals on cave walls, and even today we can see them. And I like to think I'm descended from one of them. Hopefully I look different, but anyway. I choose to paint our animals now that I am not feeding 40 baby calves twice a day, every day. It allows me to spend more time with them and my brush and watercolors. The artist, Richard Smith, and I think he's from Brattleboro area, teaches us that every work we do is essentially a self-portrait, because our paintings always reveal more about us than about our subject. Relationships of animals to each other and to their people are the subject that I respond to with joy, returning often to the maternal theme, cow and calf, mare and foal, nanny and kids, ewe and lambs. Perhaps this is because I've been calf mom to several thousand baby bovines in my lifetime. They get me when they're a couple minutes, hopefully a couple minutes old, and I feed them. The legacy of our working farm animals is admirable, and I'm happy to be part of recognizing that legacy. Being intertwined with the legacy of our farm animals, I hope, will be my creative legacy. And Thoreau said, "We find only the world we look for." So that is what I try to include in each painting and sing my painting song accordingly. It's not easy being a hard-working cow, and it's not easy being a farmer. And if we are permitted only one word to describe farm life and art, it would be commitment.
I'm a youngster and an interloper and a little bit out of place, and I wanted to, but very much in place. And I wanted to talk about another similarly out of place and in place creature that I just saw a couple days ago for the first time this year. Goes by the name of bog sucker, swamp bat, timber doodle, Labrador twister, also known as the American woodcock. I was out in a very squelchy place, Vermont Field down in Peterborough, about 3 days ago, and you wade down, well, not wade, but you walk down the path, and it's quite squelchy this time of year. And all of a sudden you're greeted by a very rude, very inarticulate noise, something like it's taken me a long time to say that's joy to my ears. I was a member of the Mrs. Proctor's 4th grade class in Clinton, Michigan, in corn country. 27 of those 28 students wrote their 4th grade speech when I grow up on the topic of how they would become either veterinarians or marine biologists. I was the 28th, and I said that I was going to become a lawyer. And of course that didn't happen, and immediately after I thought, well, the natural world is the place I've obviously got to be. And I became somehow, by hook and by crook, a birder. This is also what first took me to this state. I was taken in hand by an old teacher who moved to Peterborough and taken down to this very same Vermont Field at this very same time of year. And I was pointed out a bogsucker, a bird with an outsized bill used for probing in the mud, a shorebird that you're not going to find on the shore, who, after this ridiculous painting display, takes off in this kind of flickering flight out in the dusk around you, making larger and larger circles, climbing up in this fantastic display that you would never expect from such a lowlife. As Anne was talking about the portrait being reflective of the maker, I was thinking about the first time Thoreau talks in his journals about coming across a woodcock, and he's usually very generous to creatures of the earth, and all he has to say is, saw a woodcock feeding, probing the mud with its long bill under a railroad bridge. For a long time could not scare it away. What a disproportionate length of bill they have. Is it a sort of badge they wear as punishment for greediness in a former state? So next time you see one, this is sort of a scarlet letter that it wears. And I'm thinking about this bill in particular because I've always had a question in my mind is how, when they're probing the mud there, searching for earthworms, how is it that they can probe down all the way up to their eyes and somehow pull out worms without being able to see it? They have some sort of sensation, obviously, at the tip of their bill, and that is not known. It is not known what that mechanism is by which, feeling down with this strange proboscis, they find their evening meal. What is known is that it's flexible, sort of like a straw at the bottom of your milkshake. And my question is, what does it feel like to search for earthworms when your eyes are set in the back of your head and your ears are placed between your eyes and your bill, and your brain is actually unique in the bird world, is turned upside down? I would really like to answer that question, and I have only once had this experience of knowing what it's like to fish something out this way, and so I'm going to give that to you very briefly. I was, and wish I still were, the steward of the Willard Pond Wildlife Sanctuary, which, if you haven't visited Willard Pond, you should go out of your way, because it's a gem, and I don't need to praise it here. One reason I would like to still be steward of the Wildlife Sanctuary is not only that it was 1,700 beautiful acres filled with everything the imagination needs to keep going, but it was a really sweet gig. You had a tumble-down but very beautiful house, and you had duties that included going outside, walking trails, trying to learn the place so that you could be its human figurehead. It's great to be a figurehead of something, even if no one else is paying attention. I was walking the trails one day, and this gets very hard to believe, and it gets very hard for myself to believe. And I veered off from one of the trails, going up toward Goodhue Hill on the east side of the pond. And I was bushwhacking probably 80 to 100 yards from the trail, and I came upon a piece of garbage. And as steward, it's my job to clean up the garbage, of which there's very little. And so I picked up this thing, and it was heavy. And I put it in my backpack, and I took it home. It was covered up with duct tape. I cut that off. Inside was a box, rotting away, hinges rotted, the wood rotted from beneath the hinges. There was on the top of the box, an embossed eagle, head of an eagle. And inside the box was wet as it was, there was a plastic bag containing a copy of John Steinbeck's Travels with Charlie, 2 wooden chess pieces, a white and black knight, and a note that said, "Welcome to the road. This is the first of 8 clues leading you to San Francisco and buried treasure." I was very sure, and still am a little unsure, whether this was in fact a hoax. I have loved treasure hunts since I was a very small child. For Easter, which is tomorrow, we had a very regular tradition in the household of waking up, not just searching for eggs, but before even finding an egg, finding some clue written in a riddling limerick mode by my mother, and you'd go off from one place to another, chasing it down. This usually took till evening until you could get through them all. And I myself have made hunts for many people. I made an elaborate hunt about 5 years ago for a very beautiful girl in Cambridge, who didn't find me very beautiful, but she did follow my hunt around from 11 different clues around the city that ended with her digging up my car keys, getting into a car that she had never seen before, with instructions on the dashboard that said, "Pick up the first hitchhiker you see." And I was 2 miles down the road. It worked like a charm. And how she didn't fall in love with me, I don't know, but she did. I found this clue in October, and I was steward of a wildlife sanctuary. I can't just pick up and follow this path that you've laid down in the earth for future generations. I wasn't just about to pick up and go to San Francisco, but I thought about nothing else for the next 7 months until I could. And so in June, 2 summers ago, I picked up and set out for the first destination. The clue was written in. This was not one of your riddling clues that had to be solved by a whole lot of research. It told you are to go to the Chimney Point Bridge in Vermont, on the Vermont side, near Lake Champlain, and you are to dig under this pier. So it was quite specific. I picked up, I packed my bags. I had everything you could need, about 40 pounds of books, a sleeping bag. I had everything I needed except a trowel, as it turned out. I had just a pair of needle-nose pliers. But as I was getting ready for this trip, I thought, I love hunts, and this has miraculously fallen into my hands. I'm very lucky, but there may be nothing there. This clue was found on the surface, all rotted away. How do I even know that it's going to lead me anywhere? That said, I begin approaching Lake Champlain, leaving Willard Pond behind, and as I'm getting closer and closer, my heart's coming higher and higher into my throat, and I realize that I've staked pretty much my entire future on this panning out, and that I better find this next clue. I arrived to the bridge, only to find the driveway leading to it entirely roped off with yellow caution tape and big earth-moving equipment, bulldozers, backhoes, all surrounding the bridge where I am supposed to dig. I get down between the tape, walk down there, and find that the exact spot where I'm supposed to dig is all sodded over and covered with straws, though it's just been newly excavated. In despair, I go to the nearest building, which is off to the left. It is the Chimney Point Bridge of Archaeology. There is a banner across the front saying, "Now displaying 10,000 years of finds from the Chimney Point Bridge." So this is all part of some fate beyond too large for me. And I knock on the door. The museum is closed, but the woman inside says, "You can't dig at this bridge. It's federal property, and they're working here, obviously, and you don't even know if you have the right bridge. This bridge is only 3 years old. Your clue looks like it could be 10. The old bridge was downstream, a mile down. Pack it up and go home." And I said, "Well, I can't do that." So I said thank you, and I leave, and I go back to the foreman of the work crew there. They're on lunch break, sitting up on picnic tables, and they're a long way away, the length of this hall, and they see me approaching their site, and they stop chewing their sandwiches, and the foreman says, "What do you want?" And I explain, "I have this clue I have to dig. May I?" And they say, "Sure, dig wherever the hell you want. We don't care." So I take my needle nose pliers, and I've got now a full crowd, which is not what I wanted. But I make my way over to the bridge pier, get down on hands and knees. I've got my compass. I think I found the correct bridge pier. I have the wrong bridge. I have a place that's just been excavated. I don't have the right equipment. The clue is most certainly not in this spot, but I dig, plunge it down, 6 inches, 10 inches, nothing. It's just fresh earth. About 12 inches down, I hit some new stratum. Down and down. At this point, it seems obvious that the clue is not there, and I need to pack it up. And what's going through my mind is, what am I going to tell these no-nonsense workmen that are really enjoying me stab the earth like a maddened woodcock? And at that point, just at that point, one more plunge in the earth, and I hear something solid. And it's an old peanut jar. Unscrew the lid. There is a little mason jar half filled with scotch. And a note that says, "Not even congratulations." The note said, "Your next clue is in Grand Marais in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan." This is a story that is going dangerously beyond this place. And I can't finish this story. This hunt did leave me, although all the notes were simply signed J in a cryptic manner, through a couple turns of events, I figured out who was leaving me this hunt. His name was this was a man named John Knight, formerly of San Francisco. He had been leaving this hunt backwards for me. From my perspective, he'd started in San Francisco and ended up in Willard Pond. He grew up in Greenfield till he was 12. Circumstances took him out to San Francisco. He's since moved to Brooklyn. And we started writing back and forth for a couple of years before we actually met this previous month. And in his first letter that he wrote to me, he tried to explain himself this way. "Dear Henry, on July 2, 1621, Edward Winslow and Stephen Hopkins set out from the Puritan settlement of Plymouth Colony on what is now Cape Cod Bay for Pokanoket, about 40 miles inland. They were on a mission to meet the Sakem of the Massasoit, the Wampanoag tribe that had helped the Pilgrims survive their first winter in this new to them country. They traveled on foot with their muskets, a few gifts, and a cooked partridge. Tequantum, or Squanto, was their guide. The trail was hard-packed dirt, clearly well-traveled, and on their second day, they met a group of Wampanoags returning from gathering lobsters in Plymouth Harbor. As they stopped to talk, the Indians pointed out 4-foot circular holes dug along the side of the trail that neither man had noticed. There, they said, were memory holes. and they were dug each time something important happened along the trail. As travelers passed by, each would maintain the holes and tell the stories of what had happened there years or even generations before. So that as a man traveleth, Winslow later wrote, his journey will be less tedious by the reason of many historical discourses that will be related to him. I wish I had more historical discourses for you. I was the person who was sent to maintain these strange holes in the earth. This was John Knight's rationale for making mincemeat of my future life. There are all sorts of mysteries about this hunt, not least of which is how I came upon this clue in the first place. And I refuse to speculate beyond that question because it seems to involve issues of free will and the Lord. And I won't try to answer that here. But the fact is that I did dig this up, and that I'm somehow a keeper of it. And at a certain point in the journey, partly because it takes so long to cross the country, and because you're thinking about this one particular narrative that seems to have a grip of you by the throat, it's the same sort of feeling as when you're reading a whole lot of detective novels, and it seems that all of a sudden you look around with a kind of constant paranoia that everything is a clue, and everybody you see could potentially be a murderer, and if you could only sniff it out, if you could only collect these clues and string them together one by one into a trail, you would be onto something. So in that state of mind, which I recognize is not an entirely sane state of mind, it started feeling as though everything around you was looking at you, as though everything you came to this point in the trail, and whether it was a tree or a rock or an arrow that said dig here, that all those things were somehow stopping you short and saying, "Pete," straight to you, and that it was meant for you in some way. I've often, partly because I'm a Michigander and not from the region, I hear a lot of talk about rock. I didn't grow up with rock. If you play rock, paper, scissors with somebody from the Monadnock region, you always choose paper because people want to be Monadnock, granite, no soil on top of our substratum, which is volcanic. And yet, this time of year, Easter time, you go out in these really squelchy places that seem to have a history beyond you or me or any particular generation even. And when you're in those rites of the season, it seems like you could put down your bill just about anywhere and hit something. At least hit something that was worth following.
Yes, indeed. I will read a little bit from book Seeking Parmenter. And I'd like to begin with a couple of paragraphs from the preface to orient us geographically and topically. Walking the rural highway, New Hampshire Route 31, between Antrim Center and Clinton Village, I reach the old Parmenter farm. My eye goes out to the large sign propped up in a field grown wild, "For sale, 33 acres." But when I look across the ragged open space and into the disheveled woods beyond, I see something else. I picture Guernseys feeding. Across a stone wall, men build a load of hay, the hay rack drawn by a single large horse. A chubby woman emerges from a hen house carrying eggs in a pail. Her daughter opens the shutters on a slab-sheathed roadside stand. Behind the stand, a 10-year-old boy moves on his knees down a long row of beans, sliding a bushel basket beside him as he picks. I can also imagine a bulldozer scraping wide swaths of the second growth field's dark soil, heaps of sand and gravel to one side, concrete forms stacked beside the stone wall. The old pasture is being shaped for something, but I can't tell what. A house with two-car garage, a gardening center, a mini-mart, an animal shelter. There's no point in my letting my imagination range at will. Time will tell. There is no idle land. I pass by the neglected field and meet a slim young woman, mother of Amos Parmenter's great-great-great-great-grandsons, tugging out poison ivy roots and sumac shoots to prepare places for her perennials beside a stone wall Amos laid up along the road well over 200 years ago. She shows me some of the pieces of equipment she has unearthed in her digging. Part of a peculiarly broad-tined dung fork, we guess. A section of scythe blade, half a heavy gate hinge, the hub of a wooden spoked cartwheel. She has placed these relics on top of the wall to set off her bright day lilies. So Seeking Parmenter is the story of a second growth farm that has not yet been paved over. Amos Parmenter was raising beef cattle there during the War of 1812. 4 generations of his descendants they're living from this soil. The last was my father, who ran a small dairy farm during the World War II era. And farming ended there some 65 years ago. So if there's a theme to this story, it comes from Paul Resendiz, who says, this may be a little hard to follow, who we are now is all that has happened before us, happening as us in the now. Now, I suspect everyone here has walked far into the New England woods and been intrigued by signs of former farm life. And I do that kind of surface archaeology to the extreme, some people say. Each year I set up my tent at the edge of a former orchard, and I camp there alone for a week at a time. I spend